excited to have Nancy with us tonight. I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. I think everybody knows who she is, though. Nancy Verrier has a master's degree in clinical psychology from John F. Kennedy University in California. She is a psychotherapist specializing in working with adoptees, natural mothers, and adoptive families. She is the mother of adopted, biological, and stepchildren. In addition to her clinical work, she is an international lecturer on adoption issues and separation trauma. She is the author of 2 books on adoption. I've got one too, The Primal Wound, and it has become a classic in adoption literature. She was awarded the Book of the Year Award from the Council for Equal Rights in Adoption in October 1993. And in April of 2003, she received the highest honor given by the American Adoption Congress, the Emma Velarde Humanitarian Award. So it gives me a great pleasure to have Nancy join us this evening. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you very much. I am very happy to be here.
So sorry for the late start.
Well, that was my fault. That's because I'm not used to this laptop.
That's quite all right. Well, you've got a house full this evening and they're anxious to hear from you. So I'll just let you go ahead and share with us this evening. And everyone, as Jennifer mentioned, you can ask questions and we'll in the chat bar and we'll monitor that. And then we'll, after you finish, we'll open up to Q&A.
Okay. All right.
Go right ahead.
Well, it's a big subject. And I guess I can start at the very beginning where we're talking about separation trauma and how that enters into all of your lives in one way or another. Because one of the things that we have to remember that besides being human beings, we are also mammals. And mammals usually spend a lot of time with their mothers. And what happens when mothers are separated and babies are separated, it creates trauma for both the mother and the baby. And that trauma comes through in all kinds of ways in both their lives. So that's because the separating of babies and mothers is not the natural thing for us mammals to do. But lots of times human beings get a little bit arrogant and think, well, you know, we're human beings. We can do anything we want or something like that. But we still have to remember that our instincts are there and we have issues when something happens to those instincts. So in any case, separation trauma is the trauma for both the mother and the child. And they play out, as I say, in the lives of both of you. And one of the things that happens when babies and mothers are separated is what we call emotional disturbances. And the baby knows the mother through all its senses. It's the way the mother is, her energy is, and all of that kind of thing. So when the baby is handed over to someone else, that's disturbing for the baby because that's not the person they thought they were going to be handed over to. And so one of the things that happens is that something feels a little different for the baby. And as an adoptive mother myself, I was totally not in touch with any of that and had no idea that my daughter knew the difference between the mother that gave birth to her and me. So I learned along with a lot of the rest of you about that. My biggest lesson in that was when I gave birth 2 years later and then experienced the birth and my child that I just gave birth to. And at that time, I could not understand how babies and mothers could really stand being separated. And one of the things I decided was that my daughter was going to be reunited with her birth mother. She was at that time 2.5 years old. So anyway, so what happens when you separate babies and mothers? There's all kinds of things happen in the neurological system. And those things that happen in the neurological system play out over the years of your lives. And for the baby, one of the things that we have what we call implicit memories. And implicit memories mean that our bodies, our senses, our cells, and all of that kind of thing remembers things, but consciously or explicitly, we don't remember them. And that happens up until about age 2.5 or 3. We don't remember things consciously. And so many of you have wondered for all your lives, probably some of you, why do I feel the way I do? Why am I acting the way I'm acting? And all of that kind of thing. And it's because you don't have those specific memories, those explicit memories of what happened and why what's happening the way they're happening to you. So it's very important for you to know about implicit memory, because that's what makes this hole in your heart and that kind of thing. You do remember that mother, and it's there in all of your cells. Now there are two problems then for adoptees. One is the separation trauma, which is a real trauma. I don't think there's any trauma that you can have that's greater than separating a baby and mother. So that's a real trauma that has to be addressed in some way. The second dilemma is then you're going to be living probably with genetic strangers. And until we learned more about DNA, we really weren't so concerned about that. Remember, there used to be this thing about nature versus nurture, and which has a more impact on people's lives. And I can tell you, since I've worked with so many adoptees, I really think that nature has a real lot to do with who you are. And by that I mean your character, your personality. I mean, we can tell about your color of your hair and the color of your eyes and those kinds of things. My throat's kind of rickety today. But there are a whole lot of things that are the same that you get through your DNA. And so I know that a lot of adoptees, probably almost every adoptee I've ever met, says, I just don't feel quite as if I fit in. And that fitting in is the part that when you are with your biological family, you know things about them because they're just there and it feels right. And so, and I don't mean all kinds of things that you may not like about your biological family. I mean, everybody has that, I guess, but some things you just know. And I don't know if any of you saw the thing about the triplets that was on not too long ago, maybe quite a while ago. Time goes by fast. But anyway, the kinds of things that you inherit from your biology and your genetics are very important to you. And I think that's why at certain times in a child's life, they feel as if they somehow don't fit in their family, and they want to find out where they do fit. And so that comes up with whether or not you have reunions and all that, which I haven't really touched on and probably might not get to. But one of the things that I want to emphasize is that during that time when you have these implicit messages going on, you start making some kind of a belief system out of that. And so you try to figure out, well, why am I with somebody besides that mother that gave birth to me? And you know how children are, they always blame themselves for everything. Their mother and father get a divorce, and they think if I had just been a better kid, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But that just, I think, makes the child feel as if maybe they have more control than they really do. So, so those beliefs and thought processes are what keep people in that spiraling, going around and around. I wasn't good enough to keep, no one loves me, my mother didn't love me, I mean, all kinds of things, these thoughts. And I'm beginning to think in psychology, we need to just kind of do away with all those thoughts about a lot of things, because people stay awake at night thinking things that probably aren't even true. And so getting some kind of control over those beliefs and thought processes is a very important thing to do. And I have some suggestions in my second book, Coming Home to Self, which helps that process. One of the things that happens is, and I think that a lot of adoptees believe in this original sin thing or something, because they kind of blamed themselves for everything. But there was a priest, I think his name was Thomas Morton, and he didn't like that whole idea. He was a Catholic priest, I believe. I was trying to find that book, and I have so many books I can't always find the one I'm looking for. But anyway, his idea was he wrote a book called Original Blessing. And I like that idea much better. I mean, the whole idea that you might be convicted of something before you even get to do anything, it didn't appeal to me too much. But anyway, so in Original Blessing, or in the idea that a baby is born with this wonderful essence of itself. And until things start happening to that baby, the baby is that essence. And then as things transpire, and things happen in a person's life, in a baby's life, in a child's life, all kinds of things pile on that essence, that original person. And what I'm trying to say is that all of you were born a wonderful little baby. And I don't, some adoptees think that I'm saying that something's wrong with you. No, I think something happened to you. Something happened to you, and the things that happen to us in our lives have a big influence on how we feel, how we act, and so on. So those kinds of things, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to write The Primal Wound if I tried to write about everybody's personality, everybody's character traits, and all of those kinds of things. What I wrote about was how you cope. So most of your life, you've been working with your coping self. And that means you've been trying to figure out how to make things work when they didn't feel as if they work, how you stay in a relationship when you're so afraid that someone's going to leave you. All these kinds of things, when those are the kinds of things that happen to you, but they already happened. It's not necessarily true that they're going to happen again. However, that feeling that they could happen again is something that keeps happening to you. So I want to just run through quickly the general issues of adoption, the ones that you probably have been dealing with, or some of you have been dealing with. And of course, the first one is that loss, the loss of the first mother. And in that sense, a kind of a loss of self as well. Because you know that when you try to adopt a kitten or a puppy, what do they tell you? Well, you can look at them now, but you can't really take it home until it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks old. Now, isn't that interesting? Because they don't seem to be at all have any hesitation in taking babies away from their mothers the minute they're born, which really isn't a good idea. Number one, it doesn't finish the birthing process, and we know that children stay in their families a lot longer than puppies and kittens. But anyway, so there's something that happens during that time. And so abandonment and loss are two things that come right up, of course. The fear of abandonment always being there, because there's some sense, even though you don't remember the event itself, there's some sense that something happened. And then later, when you find out you're adopted, you find out that your mother didn't keep you, and you wonder why, and you think of all these reasons, mainly blaming yourself, that you're just not good enough, or not something or other, not lovable or whatever, which of course is not true. So then there's the problem with rejection. I mean, it's very easy to feel rejected a lot of the time. It's very hard to trust people, because if you can't trust your mother to keep you, who can you trust? There's troubles with intimacy, because the closer you get to people, the harder it is going to be when they leave you, which you expect them to do. Then there's the real issue of identity. And identity is a really big issue for adoptees, because somehow you don't quite look like everybody else in the family. You don't act like everybody else in the family, and maybe you don't even want to do what your parents want you to do. Like I know a lot of guys said, my dad wanted me to play football or soccer, and that wasn't really my thing. And yet, that's what was expected of me. Or maybe my dad was a CEO in this big company, and all I wanted to do was play soccer, and he just didn't understand it, wouldn't go to any of my games. And then for the girls, I think the biggest issue comes around identity time during adolescence, because that's when the mother and the daughter find these differences between them, and there's a real rejection, or a resistance, I should say, on the part of the adopted person to be that person that they're expected to be, and they don't feel like that's who they are. And so a lot of problems come up with I think female adoptees, more between them and their mother at that time. And so one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is guilt, shame, power, and control, because shame has to do with who you are. Guilt has to do with what you do. So I think a lot of, I'll always tell adoptive parents, whatever you do, don't shame your child, because you're not going to make a connection if you shame your child. You can say that there are things you don't like about what they're doing, like getting in the cookie jar when they're not supposed to, or whatever. But shaming a child, something that feels intrinsic to them, makes it very difficult for them to overcome and feel connected. So there are three ways that I used to call this the three faces of adoptees. And you can tell that I'm kind of old, because that came from that movie, Three Faces of Eve. But anyway, three faces of adoptees. The first one is the coping. I mean, you spend a lot of time in your childhood coping, trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And I can't even imagine how foster kids do it, because they get used to one family, and then they're supposed to go to another family. And, by the time they get to their fifth or sixth family or whatever, I mean, they can be much more than that. They've probably given up trying to figure out what it is everybody's expecting of them by then. But so the coping is how you're trying to, number one, either tiptoe along and be very, very good and not make any mistakes. And that's what they call the good adoptee. Or you might just be really letting everybody know what your feelings are and not fitting in so well, and trying to let people know that by just acting out. And so those two ways are the ways in which people usually let people know that something's going on. The second thing after coping, and the coping, as I say, are all those trust issues and rejection issues and all those kinds of issues. Then there's the adaptive adoptee, and that's the one that's trying to figure out every day, how do I fit into this family? What am I supposed to do to fit into this family? And one of the things I think it's really important, now that we know more about DNA and how much that has to do with who we really are, I think it's important that both adoptees and the parents understand that DNA has a great deal to do with who we are. And that doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that there are a lot of traits of people that are there right from their very beginning. And sometimes they get covered over because of trying to adapt or be coping. But there's an authentic self there, or an essence of self there that was there right from the very beginning and is still there. And part of what you want to do as you become an adult is to try to fit into that. Try to fit into who you really are, the person you are, and not try to fit into everything else that everybody else wants you to do. Because it's really important to come back to yourself, to be yourself, because that's how you can be genuine, and that's how you can interact with people. So I just want to again say, there is nothing wrong with you. There is something that happened to you that makes you feel that way. And I'm not talking about any kind of birth accidents or neurological issues or those kinds of things. I'm just talking about when a baby is born, the baby has a right to think that they're just going to grow up the way they should. And it's just more difficult growing up in a family where you may have very little in common. And, you know, I've met a lot of adoptees who have very little in common with their adoptive parents. And that's fine as long as everybody understands that and that everybody is allowed to be themselves. And that's not always the case, unfortunately. So there are all kinds of other things that I could say, but I kind of want to know what all of you are thinking about and wondering about. And guys, I really like to work from questions, you know, and so I guess I could open it up for questions, or you can do that. Marcie.
Okay. Yeah, we had 2 come in so far. Renee, would you unmute yourself? Renee in Florida.
Ryan, sorry.
There
Hey,
you are.
Nancy. How are
Hi.
you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I am just wondering if you have any studies that you can point to, because with SOS, right, I want to inform all these moms of everything that I can, right, before they go through with this. And so having the studies really helps not only with the moms, but also helps educate others in society. So for example, you know, medical professionals and other therapists who, you know, maybe are not trauma trained and those type of things. So it helps to kind of have some of those factual studies that I can refer to.
Okay, you know, one of the good organizations to get in touch with is the Pre and Perinatal Psychology. Let's see, is that their name anymore? Pre and Perinatal Psychology Association. I'm sure that's not the way they start their name now, but anyway, you can find that easily.
Yeah, I'll
And
find it.
Yeah, and they have a lot of studies and they have conferences and they talk a lot about this. Tom Verney, I think I've referred to his books in the back of Primal Wound, and so I don't have a list of things right now. I'm sort of retired, and so
I know you are.
I'm retired and I'm stuck at home. I love my daughters, but boy, they don't let me out of this place.
They don't want you going anywhere, Nancy.
They don't want me getting out there where all those bugs are, you know. And I had, as you can tell by my voice, I've had respiratory problems, so I have to be careful. But so I've been here at my home now since my 82nd birthday. That was March 2nd. So what's that, 4 months? Or seems like at least that 4 months. But anyway, so Tom Verney's book, all of these kinds of, and I can get a list of them and put them on my website or something. But I have, all I'm saying is, I mean, I know that there are people that would like to argue this whole thing about babies know their mothers, but I can't figure out how anybody who's ever given birth to a baby can miss that, you know, because they do. And, you know, even if you hand them around, you know, when they get a little bit older, they're always looking around for mom. And so, and that comes from all those sensations that they feel inside, the heartbeat, the sound of her voice, the smell, the, you know, it's, and all her essence, her own way of her energy and that kind of thing. All of those things are known to that baby, and someone else is not known. So it's very important to let them know. And what I'd like to say, if you're talking about women who are thinking of giving up their babies, they need to know that that's a lifelong trauma, for one. And you know, and I know that some of them try to get these these deals with the adoptive parents and everything so they can be in their lives, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And for the adoptive parents, I think if you have any idea, or if the people that are thinking about adopting, if you have any idea that the first mom really wants to keep her baby, I would not try to separate them. You know, I mean, there are some reasons that they can't keep their babies, but so anyway, I just think that it's really important that there's a lifetime full of all kinds of issues that come up for both the mother and the child when they're separated. And as I say, we don't even give them 8 weeks. You know?
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see. Nancy Smithers wants to know if your books are going to be on audio anytime soon.
Oh, people are always asking me that. You can tell I'm not going to put them on audio when I've got a voice like this. You know, I used to sing. In fact, my favorite thing was singing Russian songs. I still love singing Russian songs, but in fact, my singing voice is probably better than my speaking voice now. But anyway, yeah, I haven't decided to do that, and I can see why nowadays everybody they want to be listening to it as they're driving down the freeway. Not that anybody can drive down the freeway these days, but anyway, I'll keep thinking about that.
Okay.
I might have somebody who might do that for me.
All right.